And you admit your fault. When I say admit your faults, it's like if you've done something wrong in any type of setting, relationship, family, whatever, could you admit your fault?
I can admit my faults. And so when you talk to most people about, and depending on what it is, will it be self-preservation taking over, or will it be that they won't admit their fault for the fact that it would expose them as being wrong in the way they act?
Okay, so it's like this. So if I did something wrong to you, I know it was wrong. But and you could tell me, hey, you did this wrong or whatever, and I can go into denial and say, well, no, I don't remember doing that, or really, I did that. Would you consider that as not admitting my fault and disguising it, or am I truly just didn't realize that I was doing that? So would you consider that as a fault, or should I admit that, or is it the fact that I know I did wrong? And I just don't want to admit it because then I'll have to face up to the fact of, oh well, I you did him wrong and you need to admit that you did him wrong.
It could be both. Okay. Example, relationship with a cousin of mine. I brought up the fact of how they treat me in the relationship. They denied that fact. Okay. So is the denial part self-preservation, or is it genuinely that they don't see it the way I presented it?
It could be that the cousin does not see it the way you presented it. And I think that's where a lot of us go wrong because we see it and we bring it to the other party's attention, and you do get a lot of the, well, I don't see that. It's like, well, how come I'm the only one that's noticing it? Or like you say, do you notice it and you're just trying to preserve yourself in this
Exactly.
process?
Exactly. Because a lot
So
of people don't want to own up to their own behavior, right? And
yeah.
and that's what causes the the rift in things. And so people can get it straight. When I'm talking relationships, I'm just talking relationships in general. It can be husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, cousins, friends, or whatever. When you confront people with a truth about something going on in the relationship that another person doesn't like, right?
Right.
The self-preservation part kicks in. You know, I don't do that. Well, I don't,
Right.
this, that, and the other. And even if you give example after example after example, depending on that person and their own personality, because there's no rhyme or reason to say that this person is going to do this or that person's going to do that. It's truly on the individual, right?
Right. Right.
they they'll either, and so the from where I sit, if you bring an issue to me, I'm always open to the conversation
Mm-hmm.
and analyzing, because now my relationship with my sisters, each relationship is different,
Okay.
and based off their personality and how much of their bullshit I can handle at that time, they get treated differently. And And to be fair to them, I'm sure it's the same because I'm not everybody's cup of tea all the time, most of the
Right.
time, especially nowadays. So I'm sure they have the same view. Yeah, we all love each other, but go pound rock sometime. I don't want to hear your bullshit. It's based off of the fact of, you know, each one, how much I can take from each one at any given time on what they're talking about. And that's And so if they bring something to me about how I treat them or something I did or this, that, and the other, I'm always open to the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And now, is it a thing? Do you go, well, the reason I do that is because you fucked up. You see what I'm saying? I throw it back on them. And
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people do that, you know.
Right.
Well, a reason to do that because you screwed up,
Right. Right.
and a lot of people will do that. Or they'll go into self-preservation mode and say they'll either deny it or they'll say, well, no, it's not that.
Hmm.
You know, yeah,
Yeah.
it is that. What do you mean it's not that? Yeah, it is
Exactly.
that. You know,
Exactly.
you either
So
treat me some kind of way or you don't.
right. And I feel like it's like this. If I bring it to you because I feel as though you treating me some type of way, you're treating me totally different than how you treating everybody else around. And I say something and you say it and you keep repeating it, but it's like, no, that's not true. That's not true. But then you just sometimes just have to just let it go because now, I'm not going to divert from this too much, but with this, for example, I've been told that I may treat my kids different. I don't see it. Both of my kids, one see it and the other one don't. But what happens when if the one that says they see it don't never bring it to my attention? How can it be corrected? Only because I get a third party or fourth party that says, hey, well, one of your kids feel like that you treat one better than the other. And I'm like, I don't see it because I treat them equally or I try to. And it's hard to treat them. It's hard to treat all your kids equal. You can't as much as you can. You may talk to one more than the other, or you do something. But is it because sometimes that one particular kid may fall back and like, no, I'm good, I don't want to, or they just don't want to have the type of conversations. But then they could tell a third or fourth party, hey, well, I feel different this type of way, but then it's never brought to me. How can I correct that if it's never brought to you?
Well, the thing about correction is the first step to anything is open communication line. A lot of people lose it at the open communication line because they're not open to the conversation, or they're not even open to the thought that, especially when you're talking about a parent child.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a parent, so don't nobody take this out of context. But I meet a lot of parents who say they treat their kids equally. And for me, I find that hard to do
Mm-hmm.
because even as a parent, right, you're still
Mm-hmm.
human and you're both human beings.
Right.
And regardless of whatever the relationship level is,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to have more rapport with one person versus another person,
Correct.
right? So
Yeah.
if you got five kids, there's probably one of those five that you got a real good rapport with, right?
Yes.
And then there's
Yes.
probably one that is like, okay, that one, right?
That one tries your patience a little bit more
Right,
than the other.
right.
Gotcha.
So, and this is where I say you have to take the guilt factor out of it. You're just being human, right? Doesn't mean you don't love or care for one versus the other.
Right.
Right. So take the guilt shit out of it and look at it just from the human being perspective, right? I got a
Mm.
little bit more rapport with this one. It may just be personality wise, you're similar, right? than this one who's got the daddy genes, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
that it happens, it's part of being human. It's part of the human personality. There are different things and different strokes for it, but people try to overcompensate for it and say, you know, that it doesn't exist, or one says I think they asked Deion Sanders about his kids. He said, what did he say about that? Does he favor one more than the other? He said, I think it was something like he favors this one today more than that one. He favors that one today more than this one,
And
And
that can
so
happen.
it's always, the dynamic is always shifting. I find that more reasonable
Hmm.
than to say, you don't favor one more than other. That's hard for me to buy. That's hard for me to buy because especially when you have more of a rapport, or this one is more of a splitting image or thinks more like you, right?
Hmm.
How can
Right.
you not cue more into that? You know, in
Right.
in in maybe maybe be closer or not as close to that one, you know. So I just find that hard.
Well, sometimes you get that type of response when it comes to material things. Oh, you buy this one more than you buy me. Okay, with that aspect, I try to be fair and equally or across the board. It doesn't
Right.
always work that way because sometimes one need more than the other.
Sure.
But uh and when you have it's I would say you try to be equal, but
Hmm.
there is always that one child that you can talk to more than the
Sure.
other, like especially being a single parent. You have that one child that's more in tune with what's going on with you. If your mood swings, your attitude change, they'll come out and say, "Hey, you okay?" Even though they're a child, but they still can sense that, "Hey, something's wrong with mama." I'm gonna ask. And sometimes we as single parents, if we don't have a lot of female friends or even just anybody to confide in, sometimes we'll confide in our child, which
Hmm.
causes a different type of relationship where you have the one child sit and listen and the other child is kind of like just blow it off, like, oh, okay, whatever, or they just not that, not that in tune to what's really going on. But it's hard to say.
Well, the one thing that people don't realize too is that these kids come into your life at a time where you're experiencing different things. So you get the oldest one who gets mom and dad at their youngest state, and you get the youngest one who gets mom and dad after they done ran through six of you motherfuckers already, and,
Yeah.
and so they were like, oh well, the youngest one, they just do it, yeah, because the parents are tired. Do what you like, kid, just whatever.
See, then now you sound like you done been around my family for a minute because, like, growing up as we got older, my siblings felt as though I got away with murder. They felt I got away with so much stuff that they couldn't. They had curfew. They had to be in by a certain
Right,
time. I
right,
was not. I can come and go, and but when you think about it, when there's an age difference between the youngest and the oldest,
right.
it tends, like you say, it tends to happen. They get old, your
Yeah,
parents start getting older, they don't care
yeah,
no more. But then when you got older siblings, it's like,
yeah. And
okay,
some of that responsibility shifts to the older siblings too. And the, the times change, you
mm-hmm,
know. So we're always adjusting to the times. So the times change. So
yeah,
yeah, so to say that you treat these kids equal. No, that's not true because the times change. You change as you get older kids to younger kids, things change. So, that's where I'm like, yeah, okay, I ain't got kids, but you know, and I'm not trying to tell people how to raise their kids or anything like that. No,
Oh, by
no
no
way, shape,
means.
or how. But you know, it's one of those situations. You know, it's one of those situations. So, can you admit your faults? You can admit your fault if you have an open communication and you're willing to at least listen to the conversation and be honest about it. Now, whether or not self-preservation will kick in depends on the subject, I guess, and depends on the person. Irregardless of what that situation is, I think most people are just going to default on, whether or not that's a tough conversation to have that you're going to admit the fault on.
And sometimes I think it can be a tough conversation.
Yeah.
But in any relationship, you should be able to have the tough conversation. Sometimes the tough conversations are needed to get a better understanding.
Well, you get growth out of the tough conversations,
You
sharing
do.
a few tears and a few motherfuckers and this, that, and the other. You
Okay.
you you get growth out of the tough conversations, but they're tough conversations. They do change the dynamics of what you're doing, you know, and some people just rather not visit the tough conversations.
Well, I think it's needed to have the tough conversations, which is a part of the communication, being open to communicating. You
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 know,
you can't make people talk.
yeah.
I mean, trying to make them talk, sometimes it's hard to even just get them to listen. It's like, okay, we can have this conversation. I would prefer it not be a one-sided conversation, but if that's what it's going to take for you to even just sit and think about it, let's have this one-sided conversation and I'll communicate what I'm feeling, and later down the line after you done thought about it or whatever, if you need to come back and we revisit this conversation, so be it. But
Hmm.
you, like you said, you cannot make somebody have those conversations with you,
Exactly.
which I think not having those conversations could also destroy a relationship, regardless to if it's family, friends, um, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever. Even with your kids, you could still, without having that open communication or having those tough conversations, can destroy a relationship.
Yeah.
That's my point of view.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Those conversations are definitely needed in all spectrums of relationship goals because it lets the other person know where you stand, and it lets the other person know where they stand with you. And then the other part of it is the actions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can have the heart to heart conversation, but if the action is not matching up with the conversation, right, then that's where you lose the faith in what you're doing in that relationship.
That's something that you have to look at yourself as an individual and ask yourself that, can I admit my faults? Can I admit when I've done wrong? Or if, even if you know deep down inside you've committed or you've done something wrong, can you admit it?